In the whirlwind of ancient history, empires rose and fell, and kings conquered lands far and wide. But none were as relentless as the Babylonian Empire, whose mighty king Nebuchadnezzar set his sights on the ancient city of Jerusalem. The year was 597 BC, and a shadow of destruction loomed over the holy city, where the temple of God stood in all its glory. The air in Jerusalem was thick with dread. King Jehoiakim, the ruler of Judah, had seen the Babylonians approach and knew the fate of his people was sealed. The siege was long and brutal, with the city's walls closing in, starved and desperate. The once prosperous kingdom of Judah was crumbling under the pressure of Babylon's relentless might. And then the inevitable happened. Jerusalem fell. The great city, the heart of the Jewish people, was taken. King Jehoiakim was captured, along with the treasures of the temple which Nebuchadnezzar claimed as spoils for his empire. The holy vessels, gold, silver, and precious relics were hauled away, and the city was left in ruin. Amidst the smoke and chaos, Daniel, a young man of noble birth, found himself thrust into a new world, a world of exile, a world that stretched far beyond the horizons of his childhood. He, along with many other captives, was bound in chains and forced to march hundreds of miles through the desert, across scorching sands and bitter winds, to the glittering city of Babylon. Imagine the fear that must have surged through his heart as the distant towers of Babylon rose on the horizon, growing taller with each step. A city of wonders, yes, but also a city of pagan gods, strange customs, and a ruthless king who had destroyed everything Daniel had ever known. The city was grand, its walls towering above him like giants, its people strange and foreign. But Daniel's faith did not falter. Something within him, a quiet strength, refused to break, even in the face of such overwhelming uncertainty. Unlike many of the other exiles who were consumed by despair, Daniel clung to the belief that his God was still with him, even in the shadow of a foreign empire. When they arrived in Babylon, Daniel and a select group of other young Jewish exiles were chosen for a special purpose. King Nebuchadnezzar, in his cunning wisdom, had ordered his chief official Ashpenaz to bring the best and brightest of the exiled royal family and nobility into his service. Nebuchadnezzar wanted to mold them, to erase their Jewish identity and transform them into loyal servants of the empire. The king demanded that these young men be well-educated, well-fed, and trained in the language, literature, and customs of the Babylonians. For 3 years, Daniel and his companions were to be immersed in the very heart of Babylonian culture, learning everything from astrology to the mystic arts. To Daniel, the challenge was clear. The king wanted to break them, to strip them of their identity and make them loyal subjects of Babylon. But Daniel's heart was set. Though surrounded by foreign gods and strange customs, he would not abandon his faith. In the heart of Babylon, beneath the towering ziggurats and gilded palaces, Daniel and his companions were immersed in the lavish yet brutal world of the king's court. King Nebuchadnezzar's court was a place of luxury and opulence, where the most learned and skilled of men served in the name of Babylonian power. Here, in the heart of the empire, Daniel found himself not just as an exile, but as a captive to the king's will. For 3 years, he and his companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were trained in the ways of the Chaldeans. They learned the language of the Babylonians, their customs, their writings, and the art of divination. Yet amidst the shifting sands of Babylonian culture, Daniel's heart remained anchored. But a more subtle challenge soon arose. As part of the king's plan, Ashpenaz, the chief official, had been ordered to assign Daniel and his companions a daily portion of the royal food and wine from the king's table, an honor most captives would have accepted with gratitude. The finest dishes, meats, and wines laid before them could have been a chance to prove loyalty and advance in the king's favor. Yet there was a problem. The food and drink provided by the king's table went against the Jewish dietary laws, the laws that had been passed down from Moses, the sacred traditions that marked the covenant between God and his people. To partake in the king's feast would be to defile themselves, to betray the holiness they had been taught to uphold. Daniel, even in the midst of this foreign land, chose to honor God above all else. With courage and integrity, Daniel approached Ashpenaz, requesting to abstain from the king's food. Though the chief official was sympathetic to Daniel's plight, he feared the consequences. What if Daniel and his companions looked less healthy than the others? What if the king took offense? But Daniel, unwavering in his faith, proposed a bold plan. "Let us eat only vegetables and drink water for 10 days, Daniel said, "and then compare our appearance to that of the other young men who eat from the royal table." It was a risk. If their health faltered, it could cost them not only their positions, but their lives. But God honored Daniel's faithful resolve. At the end of 10 days, when Daniel and his companions stood before Ashpenaz, they appeared healthier, stronger, and more vibrant than all the others. This miracle, this divine intervention, not only preserved Daniel's integrity, but also proved to the Babylonians that God's way was greater than the ways of their empire. Daniel's reputation as a man of wisdom, integrity, and faith continued to grow in the court. As the years passed, Daniel's wisdom continued to outshine his peers. His deep faith in God and his ability to interpret dreams and visions set him apart from the magicians, enchanters, and sorcerers in Nebuchadnezzar's court. In a land dominated by mysticism and sorcery, Daniel's gift was not a product of Babylonian rituals, but of divine grace. The God of Israel had blessed Daniel with the ability to understand dreams, to interpret visions, and to reveal secrets hidden from the eyes of men. One night, King Nebuchadnezzar had a troubling dream. His mind tormented by the vision, he woke in the middle of the night, heart racing, unable to remember the details. But he knew it was a dream of great significance, one that must be interpreted. Nebuchadnezzar, anxious and desperate, summoned all the wise men of Babylon, magicians, astrologers, and sorcerers. "I demand that you tell me my dream and its meaning," the king declared, his voice filled with fury. "If you fail, I will have you torn apart and your homes reduced to rubble." The wise men, trembling before the king, protested, "There is no man on earth who can do what you ask, O king. Tell us the dream, and we will interpret it." But Nebuchadnezzar's command was clear and unwavering. "Tell me the dream, or you will die." Daniel and his companions, like the other wise men, were summoned. But instead of panic, Daniel, moved by wisdom and courage, requested time from the king to seek God for the answer. That night, Daniel and his 3 friends knelt in prayer, praying for God to reveal the mystery of the king's dream. Their lives and the lives of the other wise men hung in the balance. And that night God answered. In a vision, Daniel saw the king's dream and its meaning. Filled with gratitude, Daniel praised the God of heaven for his wisdom and power. The next morning, Daniel was brought before King Nebuchadnezzar, who was still reeling from the fear and anxiety that had gripped him the night before. "Are you able to tell me my dream and its interpretation?" the king demanded. With calm assurance, Daniel responded, "There is no man on earth who can reveal such a mystery. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. It is he who has shown me your dream." As the king listened in silence, Daniel revealed the dream. He described the vision of a colossal statue, its head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet partly of iron and partly of clay. The statue was shattered by a stone, not cut by human hands, which struck its feet and broke it to pieces. The stone then grew into a great mountain that filled the whole earth. Daniel then interpreted the dream, revealing its prophecy. The statue represented a succession of kingdoms, with Babylon represented by the head of gold. After Babylon, other kingdoms would rise, each weaker in value but stronger in might, until a final kingdom would emerge, one that would never be destroyed. This kingdom, symbolized by the stone, would be established by the God of heaven, and it would end all other kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar, stunned by the accuracy of Daniel's interpretation, fell on his face before Daniel. "Surely your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of mysteries," the king exclaimed, acknowledging the sovereignty of the God of Israel. As a result of his faithfulness, Daniel was promoted to a position of great honor in the Babylonian court, and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were also honored. Daniel's unwavering loyalty to God had brought him favor, and through his divine wisdom, he was now one of the most trusted advisors in the empire. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is forever linked with the courage and unwavering faith they displayed in the face of a fiery death. This event occurred after Daniel had gained favor in Nebuchadnezzar's court, and the king, perhaps influenced by the very prophecies Daniel had revealed to him, decided to build a massive golden statue, a symbol of the empire's glory. With the statue completed, Nebuchadnezzar issued a decree: whenever the sound of music was heard, all should fall to their knees and worship the golden image. Those who refused would face a blazing furnace, a fate reserved for those who defied the king's command. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, faithful to their God and the commandments handed down to their ancestors, refused to worship the image. They would not bow to any idol, no matter the cost. When the music played and the entire court of Babylon knelt before the golden statue, the three young men stood tall, unwavering in their devotion to God. Word quickly spread through the royal halls that the three Hebrew youths had defied the king's command. Furious, Nebuchadnezzar summoned them before him. "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods and worship the golden image I have set up?" he demanded, his voice rising with rage. The three men stood firm, their voices steady as they replied, "O king, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." The king's fury blazed hotter than the furnace itself. In a fit of rage, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The three men were bound and thrown into the flames, but the heat was so intense that it killed the soldiers who threw them in. Then something extraordinary happened. The king peered into the furnace, expecting to see the three men consumed by the flames. But to his astonishment, he saw 4 figures walking in the fire, unharmed. The 4th figure, he said, appeared to be like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar, stunned by the sight, rushed to the furnace and called out to the men, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out!" The three emerged from the flames, their bodies untouched, their hair unscorched, and their clothes not even smelling of smoke. The king and all his court witnessed this miraculous event. There was no sign of harm upon them, for God had protected them. In that moment, Nebuchadnezzar praised the God of Israel, declaring, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." The king issued a decree that no one in the kingdom should speak against the God of Israel. He recognized the miraculous deliverance and declared that God's power was greater than any king or idol. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their courage and faith had shaken the very foundation of the empire, proclaiming the power of the God of Israel in the heart of the Babylonian court. Their miracle became a testimony that would be remembered by generations. Following the miraculous deliverance of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Nebuchadnezzar's pride was humbled in a way that would change the course of his life forever. Although the king had witnessed the power of God firsthand, he still struggled with pride and arrogance, believing in the greatness of his own empire and power. One night, Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream that troubled his heart, much like the previous dream Daniel had interpreted. In this dream, he saw a great tree that reached to the heavens, providing food and shelter to all who came near. But then, an angelic messenger came down and ordered the tree to be cut down, leaving only a stump and its roots. Nebuchadnezzar, deeply disturbed by the vision, called for Daniel to interpret the dream. When Daniel heard the dream, he was deeply troubled. He knew the dream was a direct message from God, and it would be hard for the king to hear. After a moment of hesitation, Daniel spoke. "Your Majesty, the tree you saw represents you. Your kingdom has grown mighty and its influence stretches to the heavens. But because of your pride, God has decreed that your kingdom will be taken from you. You will live like an animal for 7 years, until you recognize that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms of the earth." The king was stunned. He had heard warnings, but his pride had blinded him to the truth. Despite Daniel's plea for the king to repent and turn from his sin, Nebuchadnezzar ignored the warning. A year later, as he walked on the roof of his royal palace, the king marveled at his own achievements. "Is this not the great Babylon I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" he boasted. At that moment, the prophecy was fulfilled. A voice from heaven declared, "King Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and live with the wild animals." Immediately, Nebuchadnezzar lost his sanity and he was driven into the wilderness, where he lived like an animal, eating grass like cattle, his hair growing long like feathers and his nails like claws. For 7 years, the king lived in madness, until finally his mind was restored. Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes to heaven, and his sanity was returned. He acknowledged that the Most High God was the true ruler of the earth. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just," he declared. Nebuchadnezzar's experience served as a humbling lesson, not just for the king, but for the empire. God had shown the king that no kingdom is beyond his control, and that all glory belongs to him. After his restoration, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was returned to him, and his rule was greater than ever before. But this time the king understood that his glory was not his own, but belonged to the God of Israel. The shadow of Nebuchadnezzar's reign had long passed, and the mighty kingdom of Babylon was now under the rule of his son, Belshazzar, a young king who, unlike his father, ruled with arrogance and self-indulgence. It was a time of decadence and excess, as the king and his nobles held lavish banquets, reveling in the wealth and power that Babylon had accumulated over the years. One fateful night, Belshazzar ordered that the sacred vessels taken from the Temple of Jerusalem be brought before the guests at his feast. The golden and silver goblets that had once held the offerings of the God of Israel were now used for drunken revelry. The king and his lords drank from them, praising their gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. It was a sacrilege of the highest order, an insult not just to the people of Judah, but to the God of heaven himself. As the wine flowed and the laughter echoed through the hall, Belshazzar's pride knew no bounds. But at the height of the celebration, something unimaginable happened. A hand appeared. It was as if the very fingers of God had materialized from the air and began to write upon the plaster wall of the palace. The writing, mysterious and cryptic, sent a chill through the king's heart. His expression changed from joy to terror, and his knees knocked together in fear. The message was clear, but its meaning was not. Belshazzar called for all the wise men, magicians, and astrologers of the court to interpret the writing, but none could. The king's heart raced in confusion and panic. The queen, hearing of the commotion, entered the banquet hall. "There is a man in your kingdom," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. During the reign of your father Nebuchadnezzar, he was found to be a man of great wisdom and understanding. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means." So Daniel, now older and wiser, was summoned before the king. When he arrived, Belshazzar offered him rewards, gold and high positions in the kingdom if he could interpret the writing. But Daniel, known for his integrity and humility, refused the rewards. Instead, he looked directly at the king and began to speak. "You have defied the God of heaven," Daniel said. "You have taken the sacred vessels and used them for your own purposes. You have praised the gods of gold, silver, and wood, but you have not honored the God who holds your life in his hands." Daniel then turned his attention to the writing on the wall. "Mene, mene, tekel parsin," he read aloud. He explained, "Mene means God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel means you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Parsin means your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians." The interpretation was stark, but it was a divine judgment. Belshazzar's reign was over. The kingdom of Babylon, so vast and powerful, would be taken from him that very night. The king's arrogance had led him to defy the true God, and now the judgment had come. That very night, the prophecy was fulfilled. Belshazzar, in a desperate attempt to hold on to power, was slain, and the mighty Babylonian Empire fell in an instant. The Medo-Persian Empire, led by Darius the Mede, took control of the city. The fall of Babylon was swift, and Daniel, who had served under Nebuchadnezzar, found himself once again in the service of a new king. However, Darius the Mede, though a ruler of a new empire, recognized Daniel's exceptional wisdom, integrity, and his unmatched ability to interpret dreams and visions. Darius appointed Daniel as one of the 3 administrators overseeing the entire kingdom, with responsibility for the whole empire. But as with any rise to power, envy soon began to stir in the hearts of Daniel's colleagues. They saw the high favor Daniel enjoyed with King Darius, and they sought to discredit him. Yet, despite their best efforts, they could find no fault in Daniel's conduct. He was blameless. His work, his faith, and his character were above reproach. Frustrated, they realized that the only way to trap Daniel was through his faithfulness to God. So they went to King Darius and suggested a decree. For the next 30 days, no one should pray to any god or human being except the king himself. Anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into the lion's den. Darius, flattered by their request and unaware of their true motives, signed the decree, unaware that it would lead to the greatest test of Daniel's faith. When Daniel heard of the king's decree, he did not panic. He did not change his usual practice of prayer. Instead, he went home to his upstairs room, where the windows opened toward Jerusalem, a reminder of the God he had always served. 3 times a day he knelt and prayed, giving thanks to God, as he had always done. The conspirators, watching from afar, caught Daniel in the act. They quickly reported him to the king, saying, "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to your decree. He still prays to his God 3 times a day." King Darius, who had great affection for Daniel, was deeply distressed. He tried to find a way to save Daniel, but the law of the Medes and Persians was unbreakable. Reluctantly, the king ordered that Daniel be thrown into the lion's den. Before Daniel was cast into the den, the king spoke to him, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." And with that, a stone was placed over the opening of the den, sealing it shut. That night, the king could not sleep. He spent the hours fasting, worried about his most trusted servant. But as dawn broke, King Darius rushed to the den, calling out in anguish, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" To the king's amazement, Daniel's voice answered, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight." The king's heart leaped with joy, and he ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him. His faith had protected him. In a final act of justice, King Darius commanded that the men who had falsely accused Daniel be thrown into the lion's den along with their families. Before they reached the floor, the lions overpowered them and crushed their bones. Moved by the miracle, Darius issued a decree throughout his kingdom. People must fear and revere the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, and his dominion will never end. As the years passed, Daniel's wisdom and influence grew, but so did the burden of his prophetic calling. Though he had served under kings who acknowledged the sovereignty of God, Daniel's heart was heavy with visions of the future. These visions were not mere dreams, but divine revelations, glimpses of a world yet to come, the kingdoms of this world and the eternal reign of God, the rise and fall of nations, and the future of the Jewish people. If you enjoyed this retelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story from Whispers of Heaven. Until next time, stay faithful, stay strong, and keep listening for the Whispers of Heaven.